the usual announcements here. Welcome to this meeting, and could ask everyone to note the fire safety instruction. There are no fire drills planned for this evening. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the nearest exit. Make your way to the assembly point located in the market car park, adjacent to the Civic Suite building. Please do not return to the building unless given permission by the council staff. I'd also like to remind you to switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent. Please note the meeting will be live streamed where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. Please ensure the microphone is switched on when speaking and speak clearly into your microphone. Once finished speaking, can you please switch off your microphone to avoid feedback noise? If you're seated, I don't think we've got anyone in the public area, so we're okay there, we'll miss that one. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you should consider whether it be appropriate for you to vote on that item. And may I remind members to declare any interests in the nature of interest at the beginning of an agenda item, that on declaring a pecuniary interest, you are required to leave the room when that item of business is considered. Now today we've got our independent member, I'd like to introduce Janine Hooks to the committee. For those members that perhaps haven't met Janine before, you can stand and introduce yourself if you wish. Now, item 1 is apologies for absence, substitute members or non-members. Are there apologies for absence other than the ones we've got already? No, no others. Right, thank you. No substitutes? No. Oh, we've got one substitute. That's Councillor Ian Wilson. Thank you. Right. Non-members attending? Any non-members? No. Item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of December 2024. Are the minutes agreed, members? They are agreed. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Anyone? No? No declarations of interest. And then public questions or notice, none have been received. Item 5, proposed amendments to the Constitution Working Group. We'll now consider the report from the Monitoring Officer relating to the proposed amendments of the Council's current Constitution. Paul Birkinshaw will present the report. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Members will recall we brought a report to the last meeting of this committee, I think in early December, to consider some proposed amendments to the Council's Constitution. Many of those were subsequently approved by members at the full council meeting. You'll recall as well I had to defer the proposed revisions to the articles of the Constitution because the changes had not been shown as track changes in the Constitution. So we agreed to defer that and bring those back, and those are set out in Appendix A. And the report also brings forward some proposals for amendments to Council Rules of Procedure that have been discussed and endorsed by the Constitution Working Group. That working group comprises Councillor FD, Councillor Lambourne, who's here this evening, Councillor James Newport and Councillor Vilma Wilson. I'd like to thank their members for their work. I think a very effective working group that's getting through and will continue to review elements of the Constitution. As is referenced in the report, providing a brief overview, the amendments to the articles and largely to Council Rules of Procedure, particularly to the articles, are largely about just providing a bit of clarity, just fleshing a few issues out, I think. Dealing with some anomalies, Article 6 was around regulatory committees. We don't have that now in a committee system. We're just all about the committees. Also added an article in there around the standards arrangements. While that's briefly referenced and there is a code of conduct, there wasn't an article that people could easily read to provide an overview of the Council's standards arrangements, so that's been added in. There is an asterisk in there referencing that the Council shall appoint asterisk independent persons. That's 2. That was agreed by Council recently as well, and I'm pleased to say that we do have 2 independent persons now appointed as part of the Council's standards arrangements. And also added an article around community consultation and participation, quite a standard feature in many other councils' constitutions, and I think again helpfully provides a broad level overview. So a number of changes set out in there, and I'd be happy to take any questions on them, but as I say, I do think they are largely to clarify pieces of legislation anomalies and just be a little bit more comprehensive for the reader's understanding. As I mentioned, those were deferred, and the working group did then move on to look at council rules of procedure. You will recall that you did endorse a few changes to them in terms of bringing the deadline for questions forward, bringing the deadline for motions and those being the same, dealing with anomaly around questions, etc. So a number were approved, but they're built on that through the Constitution Working Group. Again, we've worked through with them in order to just think about how the council meeting operates in practice, where areas might benefit from further clarity, and that's primarily what it presents this evening. As is referenced in the report, Chairman, this committee is asked to consider the proposed changes and obviously make a recommendation to full council, and they'll be then for formal consideration and hopefully approval at the March meeting. I'll leave it there because there are a number of changes, but I think a good piece of work, and the Constitution Working Group will continue to review other elements as well. So it will be an ongoing process to develop that Constitution, particularly important as a new one was adopted on the committee system. So we need to keep developing and iterating that as we go forward.
Thank you, Paul. Members, have you any questions on these items? Well, there are no questions. I will now move a motion from the chair that recommendations 1 and 2 be approved. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Lambourne. Thank you. We will now vote on the recommendations, and you may ask if the committee wishes to vote en bloc. Do you wish to vote en bloc? We're going to vote en bloc. Thank you. The recommendations are that the committee recommends to full council the reasons contained within the report on page 5.1, and recommendation 1 is that the revisions to the articles of the Constitution as attached at Appendix A be approved, and recommendation 2 that the revisions to the council procedure rules as attached at Appendix B will be approved. Can I have a show of hands, please, for those in favour? Appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Right, item 6 is the statement of accounts for 2023-24. Members will now consider the report of Strategic Director of Finance relative to the statement of accounts for 2023-24. And I will hand over to Carrie Cox to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So the draft reports for 23-24 were published in July. Since then, they have been subject to audit by the external auditors, and this report is requesting the final approval of those statements. The external auditors found some errors in the accounts, but there was no changes to the primary statements. These were all in notes and disclosures, being change in classification in the cash flow statement and some differences in some notes. Whilst the accounts have been subject to a full audit, unfortunately they'll still be disclaimed, and this is due to 21-22 and 22-23 statements having a disclaimed opinion. This therefore impacts the opening balances, and future audit work will build up that assurance. Within the auditor's audit results report, which is an appendix here, they give more detail on what was been found as part of the audit and gives a bit more detail on their findings and gives us reasonable assurance around the figures in our accounts. Also within the audit results report is the letter of representation, which under recommendation 3 we are asking to be signed by the chair of this committee. Within that report there is one unadjusted error which relates to the Essex Pension Fund, which we are not looking to amend in the accounts because it's not material and does not impact the understanding of the accounts. Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to add as well that David is going to say something on behalf of the external auditor.
Thank you, Carrie. Just to add that although having signed off accounts as expected, and you would expect it each year, in the current environment, having a full set of audited accounts is a rarity, unfortunately. And so I'd just like to say a big thank you to Carrie and the team for completing this work. Unfortunately, Liz Jackson, the auditor, couldn't make tonight, and so she's asked me just to read a summary just a summary on her behalf. This is the EY report covering the 2023-24 financial statements and value for money. The report sets out the findings and conclusions reached from the work carried out. We have obtained as much assurance as possible over the 23-24 accounts closing balances and transactions, and have completed all our planned procedures with the exception of MRP provision calculation, as we disagreed with the Council's approach to the calculation and have recommended that this is reviewed before the 2024-25 accounts are prepared. The accounts prepared are a good quality set of financial statements, and there are no misstatements in the primary statements. Our audit identified a number of disclosure errors that have been made to the version of accounts presented tonight for approval. These are set out in section 5 of the report. One further amendment has been made by officers to 2022-23 figures in relation to the trust fund note following completion of their audit, identifying a difference of 34,000 in the asset disposed. We have accepted this change. The results of our testing is set out in Appendix A, Summary of Assurances. This is a good position for the Council and better than many other councils we audit. However, the audit report for this year is disclaimed as a result of the disclaimer position for 2022-23, which impacts on the opening balances position and no audit over the MRP. During our audit, we identified 4 internal control deficiencies. These are not significant in nature, but are improvements required in the internal control environment for producing the 24-25 accounts. The detail is in section 6 of the report. We have completed our value for money work and confirm in the report that there are no weaknesses in arrangements for 2023-24. Following your approval of the accounts and delegated approval for signing the letter of representation on Monday the 24th, we are planning to sign the disclaimer audit report on that date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. Now, members, have you any questions on this item? Councillor Wootton.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely no questions about the tables, the figures and the recommendations, but I turn to 7.6, which is write-offs and arrears, and I notice that from 2022-23 through to 23-24, council tax arrears are rising. Not significantly, but they are rising. Now, I'm not quite sure what the definition of when a council tax falls into arrears, because I know from my personal dealings with finance here, they're absolutely robust and very good at chasing arrears. But first of all, could I be helped with what definition do we put on arrears? So in other words, what is the time frame that people fall out or fall into that category of arrears? And if we are noticing any trends, and obviously we're looking back at the past 2 years here, but are we seeing anything for this year which is causing us concern in relation to particularly the cost of living crisis? Thank you, Chairman.
I can refer this to...
So with regard to when it falls into arrears, essentially, as soon as the financial year ends, then all of that debt relating to that year is therefore in arrears. So from the 1st of it, we get billed on the 1st of April, and therefore that debt is due on that date, and it just gets repaid through the year. So it's, once the year is complete, everything is therefore in arrears prior to that point. With relation to trends, I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out, speak to the department, and we can come back to you if they've found anything.
Thank you for that response, and sorry it wasn't intended to be a catch-you-out question, so appreciate that. But I'm just interested in what's happening. I mean, looking at the figure then, nearly £3 million is a significant amount of money of our council tax bill to be in arrears. What's the total resident council tax? You know, we're talking about 9 million or thereabouts, 10 million that comes in from residents' council tax. I don't know offhand, but I'm just looking at it as a proportion, and approaching 3 million is seeming quite high to me. I could be wrong with my assumptions.
I think some research is required for that and a proper written response, really. Thank you.
I can add something to council tax. We've just completed an internal audit review of debt management, and we found no concerns in terms of our approach to chasing debt in relation to council tax. So we issued an adequate assurance rated audit on debt management, so we had no significant concerns in terms of council's approach to debt management and how it deals with council tax arrears.
And to emphasise the point, I know that the department is extremely efficient on pursuing, so there's absolutely no implied suggestion that we're not being robust with chasing. It's just simply looking at the figures, and as we do with these sorts of figures, looking at our own systems, looking to see whether it's out of line, and indeed looking at other authorities to see whether in percentage terms we're similar to them. So it's just looking at various angles to check out that figure. But I won't labour the point anymore, but thanks very much indeed for that.
Thank you, Councillor Wootton. Any other members wish to ask questions? Was it? Oh, sorry, Carrie's going to speak.
I just wanted to add on that point that Rochford do actually have one of the highest collection rates in the district, in the county. So from that side, we know we're very well performing. With regards to the 2.9 million, that's for all years arrears as well. So that's not just the arrears relating to 23-24. That's just all debt up to the end of 23-24 relating to every single year.
Thank you, Carrie. I mean, that doesn't sound so bad. Okay, Councillor Stuart Wilson, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's hopefully an easy question to ask. The accounts were disclaimed because previous years were disclaimed, and I was hoping that future years they won't be disclaimed. If they're disclaimed this year, does that mean next year's will be disclaimed as well? Is this something that's going to be perpetual?
I don't know the full answer to that. All I know is that they'll start building up the assurances to get to a point. It won't be perpetual. There will become a point that because there'll have been enough years audits carried out that we will have built that assurance back up. But and that will start from 24-25. So it will see how that audit goes and the information that they get resulting from that audit. So hopefully we'll get a clean opinion, but I can't categorically confirm that.
Just to add, having had the accounts audited, the 24-25 audit and producing the accounts will be in a much stronger position than if it hadn't been audited, and so the auditors will not need to go as far back. Whereas with some other accounts where they haven't been audited for a few years, then there's a lot of uncertainty around those opening balances. So a lot more work will happen during the actual audit for 24-25.
Thank you. And no other members? So we can now move to a motion that the recommendations on page 6.1 be approved. Members note the recommendation 2 is to note. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stuart Wilson, thank you. We'll now vote on the recommendations. You may ask if the committee wishes to vote on block. Yes, we're going to vote on block. We will now vote on the recommendations. Those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, members. We'll now move on to item 7. And you may notice that the appendix has been stapled in front of item 7. And also item 8 is in that bundle as well, and I believe 9. Yeah. So just to make it easier to follow through. Right. We'll now consider the report of Strategic Director of Finance relative to the statement of accounts for 23-24, and David Dickinson will present the report. Thank you. Yeah, Treasury Management Quarterly Review, yeah. That's what I did. Did I say that?
Thank you, Chairman. This report focuses on the Q3 and provides an update on the Council's Treasury management. The strategy focuses on security, then liquidity, and then finally yield. A review of the Treasury has taken place, and given the relative stable cash position maintained by the Council, and as interest rates are forecast to reduce over the coming months, some duration risk has been added to the strategy, and this can be seen in the report. In Q3, 4 loans of 3 million each were made to local authorities for periods ranging from 6 months to a year, and at rates at or above 5.55%. This approach increased the average return being earned just at the point that returns from money market funds were decreasing, but also reduced the Council's exposure to banks and money market funds. Fixing rates over a longer period and covering part of 2 financial years provides some protection to the Council's risk exposure to interest rates, especially where interest rates are due to fall. Refinancing risk will exist, and efforts will be made to try and secure the best rates as and when each loan matures. With base rate at 4.5%, to be able to earn above 5.3 is a significant outperformance, and when compared to inflation of, almost pick a number, but it's between 2 and 3%, then to get a return of around about 2.5% to 3% above inflation is almost an equity type return. Section 2.5 provides details around the protection available to the Council when lending to local authorities, and while there is some reputational risk, councils have been chosen that have not needed exceptional financing during the past 3 or 4 years. If there are any questions. Thank you.
Members got any questions? I realise this was aired at full council as well, some of the content of this report. I'd want, just to clarify, we can alleviate, it's a question to David Dickinson, we can alleviate some of the effects of reduced interest rates from the Bank of England and reductions in the economy on returns by planning some of the investments or making them on a fixed term, and that wouldn't affect our liquidity, would it?
Thank you, Chairman. Up to a point. So if you've got, as an example, this council has around about 25 million on average, but it has sometimes 20 million due to cash flow fluctuations, and sometimes has 30 million. So you wouldn't want to, especially as this council doesn't borrow, you wouldn't want to have long-term loans above 20 million. So we've got around, we're looking towards 15 to 18 million of up to a year. And you can then lock in the rate. The rates are quite good with local authorities currently, and that would protect for around about a year. You would have a refinancing risk when the loan matured, but it's all about timing and looking at cash flows and the way local authorities work, and just looking at the market. So a lot of the local authorities, but some of the banks as well, are linked to not base rate but to gilt. So it's continually reviewing that, but by locking in a large part of the cash up to where you think liquidity is sufficient, then you can lock in these rates and have more security over your interest for the next year, say.
Thank you very much for that. Any other members got questions? No? Right, members, this report is to note. Is it noted? It is. It is noted, right. We can move on to item 8, which is still in that stapled bundle there, which is the Internal Audit Progress Report for 2024-25 and an update. And members will consider the report of the Audit and Counter-Fraud Manager and an update on the Q3 Internal Audit Progress Report for 2024-25. And Mike Porter will present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As it says, it's 24-25, as opposed to my title, it says 23-24, so I apologise for that. It is actually progress in delivering the audit plan for 24-25. We're in the process now of basically delivering the last few audits from the plan. We're going to take a look at the Norse contract. This wasn't originally in the original audit plan for 24-25, it's been added. We're also about to look at asset management strategy and planning enforcement. There is a review of performance management in the plan, but that's going to be undertaken by BDO in respect of Brentwood Council, and therefore any issues, concerns in relation to Brentwood will be equally addressed through Rochford. So we're going to rely on the work of BDO for performance management, and any findings, issues, concerns we will look at those. So we're making good progress in terms of delivering the plan. We will deliver the plan by the end of the year. Since the last audit, we've completed a further 2 audits, which was the fees and charges and debt recovery. CCTV audit review is marked as draft report, but that's also been completed, and we'll bring the results of that audit to the next audit committee. So in terms of fees and charges and debt recovery, both those audits received an adequate assurance rating. Just a few issues around fees and charges in terms of the concerns we had. There's no written procedures in terms or a charging policy to ensure consistency approach across the service, the organisation in terms of setting fees and charges. And research is not carried out in a number of areas in terms of setting a charge. So we're looking for more benchmarking to be undertaken with other local authorities in terms of setting these fees and charges. Moving on, if I may, in terms of progress made by service departments in progressing audit recommendations. We only have 25 live audit recommendations at the moment, and only 9 of those overdue. You will see from the table on audit recommendations, we have not received an update as such in relation to private rent accommodation. I have today spoken to Paul Brace, and he's assured me all those recommendations in relation to private rent accommodation have now been implemented, so we have no concerns in relation to those recommendations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Have members got any questions on the report? No? Well, in that case, the members, this report is to be noted only. Is it noted? Right, thank you. We now move on to item 9, which is the risk management update. And we will now consider the report Strategic Director of Finance, updating members of the Audit Committee on the status of the Council's 2024-25 Strategic Risk Register. Now, please note that the amended Appendix A, I saw it this afternoon, was circulated electronically, and of course we have a paper copy tonight. And Carrie Cox will present the report. Thank you.
Chairman, before Carrie does that, can I just take the opportunity on behalf of the Council to thank Mike Porter and his team, as members will have seen in the report. It's not they've not tendered for the new tender for the internal audit service, but I think they have provided a valuable service to the Council over a number of years. And this might be Mike's last meeting at the Audit and Governance Committee at Rochford, so I just wanted to place on record, which I'm sure you'll echo the committee and the Council's thanks to Mike and his team. So
I think I will be coming back to present my annual report, so probably sometime in June, I think that might be.
Okay, we'll see you then, and we will thank you again.
Thank you.
Mr. Porter, yeah, all of my time on chairing the Audit Committee, you've been a familiar face here, and I want to thank you for all of your service and hard work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Chair. So as the Chair said, this is a Q3 strategic risk report. It details changes to the risks in that quarter. There are 2 high risks flagged in the report. One is around financial sustainability, and this is because of the finance reform and the uncertainty of what will be announced. There's also a high risk around cyber security. A lot of work has been done against this risk, and there is more detail in the covering report. There's other changes that are flagged in the report, and one new risk to mention is around the local government devolution, and one risk that's been removed is around the asset delivery programme, because that has now been terminated. In relation to the amended appendix that was circulated, that was just to add in some further target dates that were missing from the original appendix. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Members, have you any questions on this item? Councillor Wootton.
Chairman, firstly, I wonder whether or not I could have a paper copy of the appendix to the appendix. That would be helpful because I didn't pick that up on the way in. But I turned to 9.5, page 9.5, and lovely, thanks ever so much. And I note risk 3. There's a comment there, will be addressed as soon as possible. Now, I do like some finite words, and as soon as possible I'm sure in my working days, if I'd have put that in a report, my boss would have not been impressed with that as a comment, because, you know, I thought we worked to smart objectives, but as soon as possible is somewhat vague.
That's a good point. That probably requires some research as well, looking at the nature of the risk. I don't know if the officers have a comment on that. Thank you.
I would just agree with Councillor Wootton's points. I think it's obviously not necessarily helpful. We would hope for a better commentary, as you say, Chairman. We will provide a more detailed response to do that, but we take on board the comments for future as well.
I guess, Chairman, look, I haven't read every word. It makes me a pretty sad person if I've been through every word of this, but I do think these sorts of things ought to be very tight in terms of target dates and when things are planned to be done by. So it's using an example to highlight. I think there needs to be more definition to those sorts of things, target dates. Thank you, Chairman.
And I think, in fairness, the same comment was made at Brentwood's Audit Committee, so it is something I know we are working on to try address in terms of the actions.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That is one of the issues which earlier on in my chairmanship we went on to reviewing items like this and giving it a certain amount of time to return, and then after that it would then be brought to committee. So we can follow through. I'm just trying to remember the exact wording of that, but we have got, we did decide on that earlier on. So if that can be looked at, and then we can get something in writing, as soon as it's been done. Anyway, thank you very much. Are there any further questions, members? Oh, Councillor Booth, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to risk 19 about financial services. Notice there's issues with trying to recruit. I'm sure Councillor Watton would be delighted there is a target date of July 2025 on there. But I'm just wondering, in terms of where it states, be prepared to offer enhancements to recruit and retain staff. So I'm just wondering where enhancements sit in terms of our pay and salary policy. Are they something that's been decided, or are they a very fluid thing to attract the right people?
I think I'll probably hand that one to Mr. Bergenshaw, I think.
Yeah, I think, Councillor, there's a number of means in which we can recruit and retain, and then the incentives which we can offer. I think they are variable, depending on obviously the nature of the role and the extent to which we need to do that. I'm not personally aware of any specific policy that sets them out. So I think in response to your question, we will look at whether they are required. Certainly we obviously won't where those are needed, but in key areas such as finance and providing that assurance, we will look to offer those enhancements, such as market supplements. It may be the means of working, more flexible working, lots of different types that may appeal to different people. And obviously need to, as we adapt as a workforce, it's not just always about the money. We need to look at the other enhancements which we can offer to make as an employer of choice.
Right, okay, thank you very much for that answer. I think it'd be reassuring as a councillor to have a firmer understanding of what enhancements we are offering, whether that be in terms of work-life balance, working practices, or indeed financial ones as well. Because inducements, enhancements, or bribery, they're all slightly different things, trying to get people to jump from one ship to the next. I understand probably that does go on. I'm sure a lot of that's going to go on through devolution and local government organisation as well. So I would certainly appreciate some clarity around that enhancements statement there, from which appropriate officer or group of people I'm unsure of. But I think that would be useful to us as councillors, because I think this is going to be a key aspect as we move to devolution, in order to make sure that the funds that we do have, that have been very carefully administered and nurtured by a whole host of administrations, not just the current one, not just the one before, the Liberal and Independent one, but also under the Conservatives as well. So I think it's really important that we have some understanding around that. So would like to go to risk 20 as well, because I notice it's a medium risk. I just want clarification on the end part, because it states there, please add a target date for any further planned actions and target date. I'm concerned for my colleague sitting next to me. There is no target date there. So I'm just wondering, was that an oversight, or are we waiting for clarification from Director of Assets and Investment or Director of Community and Health?
Obviously not an issue that falls directly within the remits, but I think to a degree it's an oversight. To a degree, obviously the current leisure contract is due to end at the end of March. So in terms of any specific interventions, I suspect on that we are not, there's no further specific actions that need to be taken beyond those that are already planned and taking place. We did have a meeting today, the new Well-Managed Authority Board, and talked about the risks and flagged the need to be clearer on the actions that are being taken, whereas previously there was quite a general commentary. But the point we made there, which is kind of relevant to this, is sometimes there may not be any other planned actions. I think quite often people felt compelled to write something about what they were going to do, whereas actually we need to be open with members and say, well, actually we're going to tolerate this risk within the current controls that we've got. There are no further planned actions. I think in this one my response would be that I don't believe there are any further specific planned actions, particularly as the contract comes to an end on the 31st of March, but we should have been clear in the commentary on there. It's not particularly helpful as it stands, and therefore, in conclusion, it's probably an oversight in not deleting the wording that's there.
I think we could agree probably an open goal there. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other members got questions? Well, we can then proceed. This report is for noting only. Is it noted, members? Thank you. We now move on to item 10, the Capital and Investment Strategy 2025 to 2026. Members will now consider the report of the Strategic Director of Finance setting out the framework for the forthcoming financial year for the capital and treasury activities of the Council. David Dickinson will now present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just repeating a bit, but the capital and investment strategy sets out the framework for the forthcoming financial year for the capital and treasury activities of the Council. It sets the prudential indicators against which the performance of the Council in these areas can be monitored throughout the year and reported to this committee. The strategy sets out proposals for the Council's capital and treasury management for 25-26. The proposed arrangements are in accordance with both statutory requirements and non-statutory requirements and best practice as identified by SIPFA. The capital programme will need to be updated to reflect amendments in the budget agreed at Council on Tuesday. So there's a few small amendments, but overall it shouldn't impact the strategy as it is currently. The capital programme, the report includes a risk register, and this has been updated. I don't think a risk register has been part of the strategy before. And limits on lending to counterparties has increased from 5 million, or has increased to 5 million from 3 million in the previous version. Interest rates are forecast to decrease over the next few years, which will impact the interest earned on cash. Some banks have been excluded on ethical grounds, including banks linked to China and banks in the Middle East. This will have very limited impact on the Council's treasury strategy. Some information on lending to local authorities has been included. It has been included twice, and one will be removed for the final paper, which, if agreed here, it will go to full Council on the 18th of March.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. Have any members got questions on this item? Councillor Wooden.
Thank you, Chairman. It sort of feels a bit of an action replay of Tuesday, and you've indeed, Mr. Dickinson has referred to the fact that there's some amendments that need to be made in the light of the conversation. But this is one of those things that we've got a very good report here, and I've got absolutely no issues with the accuracy. I just don't agree with the priorities. and it is for that reason I will not be able to support recommendation 1, because the first page that I turn to is 10.2, that very excellent table, and I can't support the headquarters relocation being phased in the year 26-27. So that unfortunately means that, in my eyes, the whole of the report is damned, because I just don't agree with it. And that's consistent with my comments, my speech on Tuesday. And just to really rub my nose in it, the very excellent table is repeated again on page 22. But look, I know it's early days, but I see some incredible sums, and I believe this council has been quite fortunate in various bits of grant funding. I referred to a figure of about £5 million across various strands in the last few years, and ongoing significant expenditure. But I do think it's naive to think that we're ever going to have an opportunity to spend this. Here we are, and rightly so, producing a 5-year plan. We need to do that. There's absolutely no issue. But the money isn't going to be available to this authority. It's going to be one of the early things that are looked at under the local government reform and the devolution to see where all councils are spending their money. And I think it's pie in the sky to think that we're going to have £1.5 million to spend next financial year. My view is consistent with Tuesday. Let's get on. We recognise there's work to be done in this district. Let's get on and spend it as soon as possible. But I realise that was outvoted on Tuesday. But I've got another bite of the cherry, and I'm afraid for those reasons I can't support what I believe is a very excellent report, but nevertheless it's at odds with my own thinking on how we should be scheduling our expenditure. I want to see us spend this money in Rochford. It's available now, and I want to see us spend this money for the benefit of our residents sooner rather than later. And the reason for that particularly is because later I think will be too late under the current proposals of reform. This isn't about politics, it's just simply about spending for the benefit of Rochford and what I see as common sense before the money is snuffled away from us. Thank you, Chairman, for my opportunity to speak.
Have the officers got any views on that view? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It will be updated, so the 1.5 million will be brought forward into 25-26. It could happen anyway. It could happen naturally by acceleration of capital, because this is not a revenue budget. This is the capital side. So you can have slippage and you can have some acceleration within reason, so long as there's the reserves to support the expenditure. So that will change, and then it will change from headquarter relocation to more generic assets and investments. But what my understanding is, we still don't have feasibility and a lot more detail that needs to go into making a good decision on some of the assets, but that will be not imminent, but will be happening probably in the next few months. And that's why that move from headquarter relocation, which at the time of writing the budget was correct, because that was the understanding, but the acceleration of devolution we've moved quite a way in a very short space of time. So there is that natural change to pivot, but to change priorities. But it is capital, and you need to know what you can spend and where is it best to spend, and that's part of that the asset strategy review, which is it's imminent. I think probably around about June. But also, in addition to that, there's the outturn position, and that might produce should produce an underspend, which then can be included in the overall asset review. But just specifically to the capital table, the capital spend table, it will reflect what was agreed on Tuesday.
Thank you, Mr. You wish to come back, Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little bit confused, because if I understood you correctly, and let's take the headquarters relocation, whatever its new name is, agreed on Tuesday. Are you saying then that the 26-27 can be pulled forward? I totally understand the issue about getting feasibility studies, but a budget is a vision and a hope and an expectation based on what money there is in the bank or what you hope is going to come in. So the budget actually sits totally separate to feasibility studies, albeit the feasibility studies give the information to be able to give a reasonable guesstimate on a budget. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So I totally get the argument on feasibilities, but it does seem, for example, there's feasibility work that still needs to be done on Mill Hall, but there's a budget there. So I'm not quite understanding. I may have got this wrong, but the 1.5 million, are you saying that it is fixed in 26-27 or that it can be pulled forward to 25-26? Because if it can be pulled forward, that might change my views because it effectively becomes potentially a budget item for this year.
So, yeah, so it's not a revenue budget, it's a capital. So, and it is funded from a reserve that's been set aside for capital. So it could be brought forward. It's generally, in capital, you don't often accelerate expenditure, but that can happen. And the intention is to move that budget to 25-26 and to adjust the funding from reserves to reflect that. But it could, if there is acceleration or slippage, that you do have those movements from capital in any given year.
On the basis of that understanding then, Chairman, if there is flexibility to pull it forward, which seems to be a little odd to what I thought we agreed on Tuesday, but if there is flexibility to pull that capital spending forward, if the feasibility studies, justify the expenditure, so you've gotten informed, and you are saying categorically that the 26-27 amount of 1.5 million, and I'm just picking on that as a particular item, it's a bit of a highlight, bit topical, but if you're saying that that could be pulled forward to 25-26, subject to appropriate studies and subject obviously to member agreement, there's a number of subjects there, then that makes me more inclined to agree with the recommendation. I really don't want to vote against it, but if it is as flexible as you are suggesting, then I'd like to be supporting it rather than be against it. But I've got to have the assurance that we don't leave this meeting. Oh no, that's not quite what I meant. It stays firmly in 26-27.
It can change, and the intention is to change it.
So we can make a motion to full council then, or that we look at that, because that would keep some of the residents in Rochford particularly happy, I would have thought. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Have any other members got any other questions? Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly got the impression from Tuesday we're dealing with ifs and buts and maybes and grand visions and all those kind of things. I still, as a local councillor, am keen to get some actual commitments to some of those grandiose ideas that were expressed for the sake of our community. Of course, I'm very new as a councillor. I'm not as experienced as so many of my colleagues here. But I'm slightly perplexed that we are dealing with a 5-year capital strategy. So I think everybody in this room knows that we're not going to be here, most likely, in years 4 and 5. So I do echo some of the sentiments of Councillor Watson as well, that I would just like there to be a greater sense of urgency in spending this money for the residents of Rochford and Rayleigh and Holbridge and all our local communities, and really for us to focus on what we can do in the next 3 years, rather than 28, 29, 29 and 30. So I am minded at this moment to abstain because I'm still perplexed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we could ask about having a review of the timescales. Unfortunately, of course, we haven't got the final decisions by the government, and this is a problem. But as there is this flexibility, we may have to live with what we've got at the moment, but look to actually produce a revised programme for the later years, just to be flexible ourselves, because if we're not going to be here, we can only control what we can control. And it is something that all of the council has actually got close to their heart, that they want to actually bring on some of these projects out in Rochford District. Thank you. You wish to come back, Councillor Booth?
If that's possible and allowed, Chair. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if it's within the remit or the power of this committee to ask for us perhaps to come back to us at some point, or indeed for scrutiny and oversight to take a active interest in this, where perhaps we don't leave it for a year, but it comes back to this committee perhaps in a number of months. Once we get an update from what central government is actually thinking, it's going to be a very dynamic situation, isn't it? And I think we have to sometimes be ahead of that wave rather than just pandering to some things that are imposed upon us.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. I think Mr. Birkinshaw's can respond. Thank you.
I was just going to make the point, Chairman. I think it's a very valid point raised by Councillor Booth. But clearly, it's not. Our future direction will not just be about the capital programme and the capital strategy. So, in terms of the corporate plan, our whole future direction as a council, what is it that we can reasonably and want to achieve if, for example, the council will be abolished in 3 years, and what restrictions might be imposed? So, I think it's important that we don't just view it as just the capital programme. I think once we start to get some certainty, which is coming quite quickly, then as a council, and I think as a whole, and as you expect, led by the administration, but involving all members, we'll need to rethink quite a number of aspects, really, about how that trajectory requires us to adopt our approach to a number of issues. We may wish to focus on a smaller number and really accelerate them. What do we want to leave? How do we want to work with other bodies? What are the priorities? So I think it's a broader piece, and as part of that, then I think this will then require to come back into the audit committee and to start to look at them. But the issue is going to be big for us. So whilst I agree with the sentiments of Councillor Booth, I think to pigeonhole and say, well, this committee could do a piece of work or scrutiny on this, I think it's just that point. It's going to be a much broader piece that we'll need to engage with all members on, and that's something we'll have to bring forward pretty soon.
So as I understand it, then, sorry. Oh, so you want to come back again, Councillor Booth? Sorry.
Is that allowed? Yes. Well, perhaps it's me being grandiose on this occasion. Perhaps it's a habit I've picked up from some of my independent colleagues. But I understand that tonight I had to talk to this report because that's what's been presented. So I am talking to this report. And I am really keen, as a member, that we do bring this aspect, because that's what we're talking about tonight at this meeting, but for consideration at the appropriate committee. And I'm afraid I'm just not experienced enough to know which committee that is. But I have the passion and the desire that this isn't left for a year, that we continually review this with all groups, with all members and with all officers, so that we can move to a position of understanding what our purpose is going to be and our succession planning as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering if it actually, perhaps the way to proceed, if we went with the recommendation tonight, we have to, at committee, and the council has to consider this changing scene. And we need to get something that's broader put in place to navigate our way through that. And that we have to realise. And how quite we're going to do that, we'll be guided by the officers. So at the moment, they've had to put together something which is what it looked as if it was going to be at the time they were doing the work. So there we are. Has anyone else got any other questions? Councillor Marriott.
Yeah, Chairman, can we put some kind of an amendment to this just to say that it's under continuous review? Because I agree with my colleagues here that we're in a state of flux and that we have to take action on our projects sooner rather than later. And so can we add to the recommendation that this is under continuous review and that it's brought back to the appropriate committees so that it's looked at on a very regular basis, because things are moving very fast out there, aren't they?
Thank you, Councillor Marriott. Mr. Birkinshaw, what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking the same page, Chairman. I think it's not unreasonable. We can add a bit to say and remains under regular review as the direction of the council as a result of local government reorganisation develops.
Okay, can I move that we add that the recommendation is subject to continuous review by all appropriate committees?
Sorry, I'm just wondering if we do actually make a second recommendation, encasing what's just been said by my colleague, rather than trying to do a hybrid with recommendation 1.
Okay, so we could say, with reference to recommendation 1, in view of the changing situation regarding devolution, we recommend that this is constantly reviewed to take account of the changing situation. Yeah. Is that good?
Yes, Chairman, we can add a second recommendation. As I say, I think you've summed it up. But I think generally we can think of the wording and solidify that as part of the drafting of the minutes. But I think the second recommendation is that the strategy remains under regular review and reported back to this committee as appropriate, to reflect developing situation around local government reorganisation and devolution. If that generally captures what members' sentiments are and there's a general acceptance, which there seems to be from the nods, then you could maybe just go to the vote on the 2 recommendations as presented and discussed. We kind of just picked up the piece that we don't. I think if members are happy, then we can go to the vote on those 2 recommendations.
And we can get them all properly typed up in the minutes and so on, so we all know exactly where we're from. So if the members are happy with that, Councillor Ian Wilson, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to expand a little on what my colleague, Councillor Marriott, has said. I've met weasel words in these sort of projects before when you get things like continuous review, regular examination. I'd like to see this tied down a bit more definitely than this. So I would like to see it becoming obligatory that updates to these programmes are given at least quarterly, and they are agenda items. So there's none of this. I'm sure it will be reviewed regularly. It just might get forgotten. It just might come through. Let's tie it down. Let's have a date. Let's have it fixed. We all know when we're going to get it. Thank you.
So we can add that to that wording. We vote for that recommendation that these are to be reviewed quarterly and included in the business of the council. That's a good idea, actually. Otherwise, we'll get amnesia. I can see that. Okay, if that's okay.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, Chairman, we can bring it quarterly. It'll place demand unless the administration and the council changes its priorities in the corporate plan. The capital investment strategy won't change. So when that happens, there was a point I was trying to make. Then there will be subsequent revisions needed to capital investments. But until that changes, it's quite difficult. But I'm sure David can comment, and I'm sure I'll be happy to provide updates to members and regular reviews. It's just to understand that point that it may be that until that happens, there's nothing to review on, but we may be able to just include that as a general update. I don't really want to add anything, David, but obviously happy to provide what members want and get. It's just understanding that this is a subsequent to something rather than the driver of something.
Could we say then that the situation is reviewed and that members can, under this arrangement, recommend, or rather put motions forward that things are changed inside of that, because it's not always the back end of this thing that's going to drive this thing. If we're looking to use funds for the community, it's complicated. So we just need to get the wording quite right to keep everyone happy. That's the thing. Thank you. Councillor Wootton.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've got to be very careful that we don't stray into the prerogative of the administration. It is, in fairness, the administration that make the decisions about their priorities. And I think we need to respect that. You know, our role on this committee is oversight and making sure that, you know, boxes are ticked. And I'm struggling with this report not for any reason other than it was a totally reasonable report when it was produced and issued 7 days in advance of this meeting. The trouble is we've had a budget meeting on Tuesday, which has altered certain aspects of the report. And it looks as if here we are recommending something that was produced 7 days ago in the light of changes. So I have huge difficulty with the recommendations, full stop. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just simply the world has moved on in 2 or 3 days, respecting that the administration won the vote on Tuesday in terms of the budget. I don't agree with it in terms of timing, the way it's set out here. The Section 151 officer has very kindly explained there is a degree of flexibility, but I think I'm just a little bit at odds with myself and knowing quite what to do, because we know here, and I'm still picking the same budget line, there is considerable difference of opinion across this chamber with members, 39 members, about the head office, headquarters relocation. And I can't help but to keep focusing on that line. And I don't want in any way to compromise that line. And actually, I come back at the risk of repeating myself. It is about, for me, making sure that if that money is in the piggy bank and we've got the right feasibility studies, we spend the money as soon as possible, responsibly, and in line with all the project considerations, but we spend it as soon as possible to stop it being snuffled away from our residents under the potential threat of local government reform and devolution. So I just don't want to be difficult on this, and I don't even think it's about political considerations. I think it's about doing the right thing for our residents, and that's what I'm struggling with. So I think Councillor Booth gave me the good opt-out. I think I can abstain on the recommendation as it's written, and I will support the other recommendation which is being proposed. But I think it's a bit outside the scope of this meeting, to be very honest with you.
Thank you. So we could go back to that original idea to refer recommendation 2 back to recommendation 1, mentioning the changing priorities, and that should be recognised there, and that projects can be brought forward with earmarked money that would have been in 25-26 to potentially be used in the year 25-26 rather than 26-27. We could put something like that. But we need some flexibility. I can see why the officers want some flexibility.
Just to confirm that the table will change for the table that goes to council, so will reflect the change in the heading and the year that the 1.5 million is allocated to will be brought forward. But then subsequent to that, it will be unallocated. So the 1.5 will be available for during the year to fund projects and spend that is agreed as they occur. So there wouldn't need to be further changes to the report, if subject to me changing it for final council report. But if there were changes in addition to that, as an example, needing 2 million, if that was available, then that would require a change to the strategy. And just to confirm that, so there's a part of this is capital, but there's the whole treasury part behind that, where that's unlikely to change because we've already got restrictions on counterparty limits and that. So it'll just be on that capital part, which would be agreed by full council anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. We could make sure that is included in the minutes, in the text. Councillor Stuart Wilson.
Thanks. I don't want to say something that's wrong, but I think the points that you're making, Councillor Wotton, are completely valid. They're completely valid, and they are risks to us in the future as well that we need to be alive to. So it's not that I'm not necessarily sure that we should be sorting that tonight, but they are valid things that we need to bear in mind for the future, and that's where the review comes in. And if there is significant change, but I'm assuming, and this is a dangerous thing to assume, that our officers and members will be involved in negotiations. So I'm hoping it won't just be someone turns up in the middle of the night and robs our bank, as it were.
If members haven't got any other questions, I think we can move on to voting on the recommendation on page 10.1. And we can put that to a vote. So all those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. And that will be in the minutes. That concern will be highlighted in the minutes. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 11, which is the Internal Audit Contract Award. Members will now consider the report of... Oh, sorry, I'll read it out, did I? Sorry about that. I'm getting so carried away here. Two seconds, I'll get there. Well, the recommendation was to approve the approval of the capital and treasury management strategy of 2025-26 to the full council on the 18th of March. But bear in mind, there will be alterations to the table based on the previous full council.
I think that's correct, Chair. But I think the second recommendation was the capital investment strategy remains under regular constant review as local government reorganisation develops, and that they be brought back to this committee as appropriate for further consideration. I do take your point, Councillor Wilson, but I am just a bit concerned that quarterly might thing, and I would like to have confidence that we will come back to you and do that. So if you're happy with that recommendation, as I've just worded, then I think that would work and sets out the need to keep it under review as LGI develops, which is the point Councillor Booth makes, and that this committee has a role in seeing that. If members are happy, they could take a vote on that, Chair.
Okay, members, do you want to review that vote then? Apologies for forgetting to read it. What? I'll just take a second vote then. All those in favour? Oh, that's gone unanimous. Thank you very much. Progress. Thank you. And thank you, members, for the points. It's really useful. Item 11 is the Internal Audit Contract Award. Members now consider the report Strategic Director of Finance relative to the appointment of Internal Audit Services. David Dickinson will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report is just, when it was agreed previously, it needed to come back to committee for agreement. So just some background. So Rochford's internal audit services are currently provided by Basildon Borough Council, the contract for which expires at the end of June 2025. At the September Audit and Governance Committee, September 2024, members agreed to tender for internal audit services in conjunction with Brentwood, whose internal audit services are currently provided by BDO, with the intention that the new arrangements took effect from the 1st of April 2025. This report sets out the results of that process. The tender was conducted using Crown Commercial Services RM 6188 framework, audit and assurance services. Basildon Borough Council is not an approved supplier on the framework agreement, and so was unable to participate in the tender process. It was established that there will be no 2P implications arising from the transition from Basildon to the new supplier. The tender process commenced at the beginning of November 2024 with the return date of the 6th of December 2024. In the event, 3 tenders were received from Mazars, BDO and TIAA out of a total of 18 on the framework. The evaluation criteria was weighted price 45%, quality 55%, including 5% social value. The final evaluation scores were BDO 99, TIAA 97 and Mazars 86.79, and the recommendation is to award the contract to BDO.
Thank you. Any members have any questions on this item? Oh, it's our independent person, Janine Hook. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got it's just an observation really. It's because BDO have been the external auditors for many a local government, and I think including Rochford. and you've just awarded this contract to them, do you have sort of sufficient sort of positive vibes, as it were, from them that they will actually fulfil this contract, that they've got the right amount of staff to fulfil them, that they can fulfil it properly, and that they can deliver that internal audit service for you, given that they didn't have enough staff to do all the external audit stuff?
Thank you. Perhaps Mr. Dickinson can respond. Thank
Thank you. So the council I worked for before, we had BDO as an external auditor, and when I came here and found out that BDO were providing internal audit, I had the same questions. But they've been providing a very good service to Brentwood for a number of years, and largely the team will stay the same. And so I've got quite a lot of confidence from the work they've done with Brentwood, and so it will be the same for Rochford. We will review them. There will be that initial, when you appoint someone, you always review them quite closely and make sure that they're hitting deadlines and providing the information as required. But currently got confidence that they will. And there is quite a difference between BDO external auditors who effectively came out of the market, hopefully that's okay to say, a few years ago and didn't finish a lot of the audits, compared to internal audit where they have enough staff.
Thank you. Any members got any questions? We can proceed to vote on the recommendation on page 11.1. And the recommendation is that the committee approves the appointment of BDO as the councillor's auditors with the effect from the 1st of April 2025. Those members in favour? That vote's unanimous. Thank you. Now we can move on to item 12, the Members Training and Development Programme 2025-2026. Members will now consider the report of the Director of People and Governance relative to Members Training and Development Programme for 2025-26, and Paul Birkinshaw will actually present the report. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. We were keen this year to ensure that we had a documented member training and development programme, so that's what this seeks to do. Members will note that obviously there's quite a lot in there, so it's not intended to deliver everything in here, but it obviously does set out the range of opportunities that are available to members. Largely using our membership of the LGA, there's a lot of subsidised courses, free courses, and a lot of development opportunities that we want to link members to in order that they can attend if they so wish, in addition to the general annual training programme that's done for committee members. And it's further supplemented by members' ability to attend conferences and seminars that they may identify of their own will. So it is, it sets out our intentions around training. It's fairly agile, flexible, will depend on what members want. It may be that one member wishes to go to the LGA training, or it may be a course that 15 members wish for us to facilitate. I was pleased that at both Brentwood and Rochford, part of their budget setting recently, they both approved investment into a new training officer post. So that's a shared post across both councils. And we were keen to put forward that growth to ensure that we're able to support members and actually deliver an effective member training and development programme. I think it's fair to say it's an area where we may have struggled in the past due to resources, as well as ensuring that we deliver the training that's needed to our staff in order to develop them. Also the assurance training we need to ensure that we're a well-managed authority. So in addition to the training programme, we do have some extra capacity coming in to coordinate, work with members, identify what's needed and make sure that we provide the courses that are needed. Happy, Chairman, if members have got any comment this evening or following the meeting, and it will be an area that we will engage on as we go through the year with members, so there'll be plenty of opportunity. But hopefully it does give members, and we will circulate it to them all, the breadth of training that's available, and hopefully we can tailor that for individual members depending on their experiences, role and desires to develop in that role.
Thank you, Mr. Birkinshaw. Any members got any questions? I do recall that on an email from Nicola Mann, they did mention, of course, as has been said, members are invited to suggest training that they may think might be appropriate as well. I would like to thank Nicola and thank Paul for the report.
Chairman, where
Councillor
appropriate, can we,
Marriott.
where appropriate, can we continue to include parishes in some of these trainings? Because there are, for example, code of conduct and others that are appropriate for parishes to get involved in. So can we undertake to continue where it's possible and where it's appropriate to offer these courses out to parishes as well, especially seeing a lot of them are done via Teams. It's quite easy just to let them have the Teams link, isn't it?
Yeah, that has been a sort of standard procedure we've been using in the last few years. I don't think there'll be any changes to that. I'll just check with Paul.
No, good point Councillor Marriott raises. Yeah, confirm that we will look to do that. We want to do that more. I think it's important that we work with and support the town and parish councils. And to that end as well, you may have noticed that there was previously a small fee for each town and parish council attended, but we've withdrawn that fee. One, it's an administrative burden, but secondly, I don't think it necessarily fosters the good working relationships and closer working that we want to have. So I think that demonstrates our commitment as well, and we will consider
I'm
that.
really happy to hear that, and I will be relaying that to the town and parish councillors when I get the opportunity. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birkinshaw. Now, members, no one else. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wootton.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's an appropriate point to actually say that I think the training continues to be of an excellent standard in Rochford. Over the years, I've seen an improvement. I won't say a big improvement because I think they've always been good, but I think as new regulations come in, as the complexities of the business become more complex, it's picked up, and there's not really a training session that I go on, and I go on most of them, certainly the ones that you don't learn something. And I think there's a number of people that turn around and say, oh, well, I've been a councillor for a long while. I don't go on that one because I know all there is to know. Well, it's extremely arrogant to do that because we can all learn something from these sessions. But I think the standard, the work that goes in behind the scenes to pull together a training schedule, recognising that we all have different competency levels, is excellent. So well done.
Yeah, I endorse that, Councillor Wootton. I think everyone here endorses that.
I just thank members for the comments, and no doubt that's the reason for us having excellent councillors.
As has been pointed out with the one team between Brentwood and Rochford, not technically committee business, we were ahead of the game with devolution, really. This is another way to do it, isn't there, without upsetting all the apple cart and causing chaos. I hope Mr. Starmer tunes in, because it's very unlikely. Anyway, thank you.
I think, Chairman, I can't miss the opportunity by saying I led the way.
You did, certainly. Thank you. Now, members, if no one else has got any questions, we can now vote on the recommendation is that the committee endorses the members' training and development programme for 2025-26 as set out in Appendix A. Members, all those in favour? That vote's unanimous. And I want to thank Janine Hook, our independent person, for her observations actually on the procurement, because she's got extensive experience in this area. Thank you. And we appreciate that. Thanks very much. And a thanks to the officers. And now, with all our business concluded, I thank you for your attendance, and we close the meeting at 8:48.